Hello and welcome. Today, I'm here to walk you through an important topic: redundancy within the NHS. Whether it's voluntary or compulsory, I'll explain what it means, why it happens, what your rights are, and how it's calculated. Let's dive in. In today's session, whether you're here to get ahead of some potential changes or just want to better understand what redundancy means, we're here to make things clear and give you the confidence to navigate whatever may come. In this session, we're going to talk through a few key areas to help you feel informed and supported. First, we'll start with the basics. What exactly is redundancy? We'll explain the difference between voluntary and compulsory redundancy, so you can understand how each works and what it might mean in practice. Next, we'll look at why redundancies happen. This could be due to service redesign, budget pressures, or organizational change, and understanding the why can help put the process into context. We'll also walk you through the change process, so you know what to expect if your team or service is affected. Then we'll cover who is eligible for redundancy, because not everyone automatically qualifies, and there are some key criteria around length of service and previous redundancy history. And finally, we'll touch on how early retirement might be affected if you're considering retiring under redundancy grounds, especially how it might impact your NHS pension and what choices you'll need to make. In the NHS, redundancy is a type of dismissal that occurs when an employer no longer needs a particular role or the number of employees in that role is reduced. It happens when the employer's workforce needs to be reduced due to various factors, such as changes in the business, the closure of a workplace, or a decline in the need for certain types of work. Redundancy is often a last resort after other options have been considered. We will discuss these further on in this video.
I've heard a lot about redundancy, but I'm not exactly sure of the difference between voluntary and compulsory redundancy. Could you explain further?
Certainly. Voluntary redundancy, or VR, in the NHS is a formal option offered during organizational change, giving eligible staff the opportunity to apply to leave their role with a financial package when a redundancy situation arises or is anticipated. While employee-initiated, approval is at the employer's discretion and subject to service needs. A compulsory redundancy in the NHS is employer-led and occurs when a role is no longer needed due to organizational change. Staff are selected through a fair process and given formal notice. If no suitable alternative employment is found, contracts end with redundancy payments made. Refusing a suitable alternative role without good reason may affect payment eligibility. In both voluntary and compulsory redundancy scenarios, the redundancy package is calculated in line with Section 16 of the NHS Terms and Conditions of Service Handbook, with no difference in the value of the payment. However, there may be differences in how clawback is applied if the individual returns to NHS employment.
What does clawback mean? And how does it work in practice?
Under voluntary redundancy terms, very senior managers or VSM staff who leave on VR and are re-employed with an NHS employer, government department or an arm's-length body within 12 months of the end of their current employment with the NHS, will be required to repay some, or all, of any redundancy payment depending on when that employment starts. This will be on a sliding scale over a 12-month period. Agenda for change: staff who leave on VR and find employment with an NHS employer, within 6 months of the end of their current employment with the NHS, will be required to repay some or all of any redundancy payment, depending on when that employment starts, on a sliding scale. The exception to the 6 months rule is for staff whose voluntary redundancy payment is anticipated to be over £100,000 and requires DHSC approval, when a 12-month clawback period will apply. Any recovery will be on a sliding scale over 6 or 12 months dependent on the point at which re-employment starts. Under compulsory redundancy terms, staff will not be entitled to a redundancy payment if, at the date of the termination of their contract, they have obtained without a break, or with a break not exceeding 4 weeks, suitable alternative employment, including bank work, consultancy, etc., with the CSU or another NHS employer. Anyone who is made compulsory redundant from the NHS must allow a minimum of 4 weeks to elapse before they can rejoin the NHS. This will include bank and consultancy work, or they need to repay the redundancy payment. This affects your service continuity, which starts at zero from your new role commencement. If you repay the redundancy, continuous service would be reapplied for sick pay and annual leave purposes, but not for future redundancy purposes.
So, how does the redundancy process actually work?
Change doesn't just happen overnight, it's a process, and we're committed to making it as clear and supportive as possible for everyone involved. It all starts with a proposal. When change is being considered, whether it's a restructure, service redesign, or efficiency drive, the organization first shares a proposal with staff and trade union representatives. This can be via the staff partnership forums or directly with recognized trade unions. This outlines what the changes might look like and why they're being proposed. Next comes the consultation phase. This is your opportunity to have your say. During this time, we genuinely want to hear your feedback, questions, and suggestions. We'll listen to concerns, explore alternative options, and gather as much input as possible before any decisions are made. After consultation, a final decision is made. Once all feedback has been considered, the organization finalizes the outcome. This might mean the original proposal moves ahead, or it could be revised based on what we've heard during consultation. Throughout this process, our top priority is to avoid redundancies wherever possible. We always aim to redeploy staff into other suitable roles first, whether that's within your current team, elsewhere in the organization, or across the wider NHS. Redundancy is only considered as a last resort, after all other options have been fully explored.
Once the change process is complete, how do I know if I'm actually eligible for redundancy? What are the criteria, and how will I find out if it applies to me?
To be eligible for NHS redundancy pay, you must have a minimum of 104 weeks, 2 years, of continuous service with one or more NHS employers participating in the NHS redundancy scheme. In some circumstances, breaks in service of less than 12 months may be disregarded, provided they were agreed and for valid reasons, thus preserving continuity. You must not have received an NHS redundancy payment within the past 12 months and subsequently rejoined the service. Eligibility also requires that you are not being dismissed due to conduct, capability, or health-related reasons. The termination must be the result of a genuine redundancy situation. In addition, you must not have unreasonably refused an offer of suitable alternative employment, as doing so may disqualify you from receiving redundancy pay. Staff who are made redundant should receive 1 month's pay per year of reckonable service, with a maximum of 24 months' pay. Only full years of reckonable service can be counted when calculating redundancy pay, as employment for part of a year should be disregarded. A month's pay, subject to a total annual earnings floor of £23,000 and cap of £80,000, pro-rated for part-time staff, will be either an amount equal to 1/12 of the annual salary at the date of termination. The calculation for determining NHS redundancy pay is your annual salary divided by 12. This gives you your monthly salary, or 1/12 of your annual salary. This is then multiplied by the number of full years of reckonable service up to a maximum of 24 years. The following examples next will provide real-life scenarios.
Example 1. Mohammed works full-time. He has 10 years of continuous reckonable service with the NHS. He earns £90,000 per year. As this is above the redundancy eligibility cap, his redundancy will be based on an annual salary of £80,000. Therefore, Mohammed's redundancy calculation will be £80,000 divided by 12. This equals his monthly, or 1/12 of his salary. This is then multiplied by his 10 full years of reckonable service, giving Mohammed a redundancy payment of £66,666.
Example 2. Jane has 3 years of continuous reckonable service with the NHS. She works part-time and earns £19,000 per year. Her full-time equivalent salary of £23,100 is over the minimum redundancy eligibility floor. Therefore, Jane's salary has already been appropriately pro-rated. Jane's redundancy calculation will be £19,000 divided by 12. This will give Jane's monthly or 1/12 of her salary. This will then be multiplied by her 3 full years of reckonable service. Jane's redundancy pay will be £4,750.
If you're facing redundancy, it's important to understand how your payment will be treated when it comes to tax and national insurance. The first £30,000 of a genuine redundancy payment is tax-free and exempt from national insurance. This applies whether your payment is statutory or enhanced, so long as it's not part of your contract. Anything you receive over £30,000 is taxable as income. While you won't pay employee NI on that extra amount, your employer will need to pay Class 1A national insurance on it. Some parts of your redundancy package are always taxable and attract national insurance contributions. This includes pay in lieu of notice, holiday pay, any bonuses or any other contractual earnings.
I was looking at taking early retirement. How is this affected by redundancy?
Employees aged 50 plus or 55 plus under newer pension schemes who are made redundant may apply for early retirement with their NHS pension if they meet the minimum age and service requirements under the NHS pension scheme. Their redundancy meets the definition of in the interest of the efficiency of the service. This may impact your NHS pension in the following ways. 1995 section may allow retirement from age 50 with pension paid early, without actuarial reduction if redundant. 2008-2015 schemes usually require age 55 plus and have different reduction rules. Early payment of pension may be actuarially reduced and less protected. Unreduced if it qualifies as compulsory redundancy and meets scheme conditions.
What does actuarial reduction mean?
Actuarial reduction refers to a permanent reduction applied to your NHS pension benefits if you choose to take them before your normal pension age. It compensates for the fact that your pension will be paid for a longer period, so the overall cost of the pension scheme increases. To balance this, your annual pension amount is reduced. To sum up, redundancy is a tough subject, but the NHS is committed to managing it fairly. Whether you're eligible, interested in voluntary exit, or facing compulsory redundancy, we'll support you every step of the way. Does anyone have any questions?
Can I volunteer for redundancy if I'm not at risk?
Only if invited to express interest. Volunteering doesn't guarantee acceptance, it depends on business need.
What counts as a break in service?
A break of more than a week ends continuity. This is what gives your CST1 date. Breaks under 12 months may still count as reckonable in some cases, and this is what gives your CST12 date.
What if I'm on maternity or sick leave?
You still have full rights during redundancy and must be offered any suitable roles before others.
Can I appeal a redundancy decision?
Yes. You can appeal the decision or the suitability of an alternative post under our internal policies.
Does 2P mean I'll get redundancy?
No. A 2P transfer is not a redundancy. You remain employed but under a new organization. I hope you have found this video useful. If you have any questions, please speak to your manager, people team, or your trade union rep. Thank you for watching. Take care.